Welcome to Ashler Initiates, Episode 1. This is going to be an introduction to me and to this entire project that I'm sort of starting, right? It's my first time doing anything like this. That's what makes it kind of awkward, yet exhilarating at the same time for me. The purpose of this is kind of like an introduction to my journey into the more esoteric, the more occult, the more, let's just say, spiritual side of life. And it's one of those things where I just feel like most people just don't pay too much attention. Definitely one of those things where I believe everybody is supposed to look into, but there's just so many things going on in life, right? That we just never get a chance to actually look into what many of us like to call the mysteries. I personally have been initiated into Freemasonry a few years back now, since 2022. We're now in 2026 now. But that's been more of kind of the capstone of what led to this entire journey of mine into Masonry. Prior to that, and expanding on the concept of any kind of spiritual awakening itself, there's been just way too many things that have happened in my life that kind of led on to it, right? One of the things that definitely resonated with me was as a child, as most of us usually are in our early years, I was afraid of the dark, right? It was hard for me to actually turn the lights off while trying to sleep. I remember we used to have a nightlight or something nearby for me at that time. I'm talking about when I was like 5 or 6, which are some of the earliest memories that I have, right? And one of the main things that for me was very eerie, to say the least, was the fact that I, at that age, felt like, oh, there's something here, oh, there's something here. But having said that, I somehow had some experiences that kind of pushed me into this chain of thought that I've never been able to come out of, right? There have been more things that have happened later in life to me, in my family. And I'm not talking about like poltergeists or like demonic possessions or anything as Hollywood as that. I would definitely say some things that were very, very subtle, like a corner of your eye type of things that, you know, most people would just ignore and just move past. I've always felt like anything that happens for a reason, and everything has meaning. Whether that is, you know, getting late, trying to catch a bus, you know, I feel like it's for a purpose. Whether it's, you know, going out into nature and then you suddenly get a flash, a thought about something completely irrelevant to that moment, but how it was because you actually are there at that specific moment that thought or revelation, so to speak, even happened to you, and how it fundamentally changes your perspective. Anyway, going back to my scared of the dark years, I remember, so I'm originally from Pakistan, right? I was born in the city of Islamabad. Islamabad is the capital of the country. My father, God bless his soul, he retired as a very senior bureaucrat for the federal government of Pakistan. In those years, though, my early years, I was, you know, going to preschool. I was just going through what a normal child goes through. We were in some government allotted house. It was a pretty decent place, kind of a weird vibe to it. I remember even my dad saying, I don't really like this house too much. So I was just, you know, in bed, and the weird stuff about me, one of many, as you'll come to know, is I at least feel on some level that I'm able to notice spirits, you know what I mean? And I'm not talking about like Casper or Ghostbusters type of stuff where everything is so objectively visible to you, but definitely one of those situations where I feel like this is something I was born with. So what used to happen to me, and I'm just giving you this as an introductory example so that we can start the story off somewhere, right? In absolute darkness, I'm able to, even now, feel presences, if there are any, which is the reason why I kind of believe in this, because it's not all the time. And if I feel a presence, I'm able to determine via asking myself somehow. It's like it echoes through me, whether it's, positive, negative, neutral, doesn't give a shit, because there's all types, at least in my mind. And if I were to really, really establish communication with this spirit or entity, I would be able to have some type of to and fro communication. It's not even a voice per se that would reply to me in my mind or something like that. It's more about how hieroglyphs are to text. That's how this communication is to telepathy, if that makes any sense. So, I would see the outlines of these figures. And I remember having to run to my parents' room, right? Because I get so scared. I'm like, oh my God, I'm just gonna, at that time, at that age, you feel like you're gonna die from anything, right? So, just running to my dad's side and be like, he would obviously wake up. He was a light sleeper. Ironically, so am I. And he'd be like, what happened? I'm like, oh, I just don't like it there. It's too dark, da, 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 da. And then, I remember once him having a conversation with me about this and just saying, so what happens to you at night? Like, what's the problem? And I told him, and I was like, look, I feel like there's something there. But here's where he really shined. He'd never once even, like, not even a tinge of ridicule. He would always take me so seriously. He would be like, oh, so what did you feel? And I said, well, I felt kind of scared. Okay, did you see anything? I'm like, yeah, I think I did see something. And he's like, what did you see? And I'm like, well, it's not like I saw a face or anything, but what I did see, it was the outline of some humanoid type of figure, all black, on black. And as I focused on this figure, it somehow grew from a normal sized person at the foot of my bed to all the way to the wall, all the way to the roof, expanding, and now basically covering my entire room in its dark presence. And it was just surreal, to be quite honest with you. Not once did he ridicule me, question me. I never heard the words, oh, you're just imagining things from me. I've never heard him say something like that. So, and my father, again, I keep saying the same thing. There's a reason why anything that he ever said to me or that I remember from our conversations, why it holds such importance in my mind, heart, body, soul, everything. But it was that time where, it kind of clicked in me, and also you can definitely, if you want to call it him enabling me, you can. This was just like once in a year, something like this kind of a topic came into play, and I would be like, hey, this is what happened. Like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about it. But I noticed over time that I can sense when we can all sense when there's tension in a room, right? You can see the expressions, the air feels thicker, metaphorically speaking. But like I can sense when a place is positive or negative, or I can sense if something is about to happen or it should have happened but it didn't happen, even if it's not something planned. It's just a weird kind of feeling. And I call it, and I think most people would call that intuition, right? So intuition was and is my number one source of information when it comes to decisions and any forecasts that I have in my mind. Of course, it's based on a lot of rationality, information, tangible, all of that stuff definitely has to be there. We need a processing unit with a hard drive, and we also need an underlying software, so to speak, which kind of determines what the process of thought would be. All of that on one side, though, I feel like most people ignore the other side of this. And this is where there's that real connect between like soul versus biological entity, which we really need to create. I don't feel like most people understand or value this particular element of life. And for me, that was a big catalyst at such a young age. I'll give you a little bit of a background on other things. So for example, if I talk about my dad, he was always into comparative religions, right? He was always into, well, we had a Bible, we had a Bhagavad Gita, we had a Torah, we had Buddhist texts, we had other Taoist kind of texts. We had all of this stuff in our house. He had like 2 different translations of the Quran, because of course we're a Muslim background, right? We had all of these books, and I'd be like, Abu is what you say for dad in Urdu, which is our language, right? Like, Abu, why do you have all of these things? And so neutrally, as if it's nothing, because in Pakistan, that's a big taboo, like talking about anything apart from Islam. And he would just tell me that, hey, well, if you want to understand anything, you've got to read all of it, right? And you need to attack anything from every angle before you can even get like even a hint of what that actually means. In different words, of course. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but that was the gist of it. And for me, that was very, 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 very mentally opening, I guess. It was not something that I would get from the world around me at all. I remember having a bully at school, for example, right? This guy's name was Muhammad Hussein. He was a scrawny little kid, right? But he had a mean mug, right? And he had those really bushy eyebrows at that age. And he would always walk around with his best friend, whose name I forget. And they would just walk around together, and these guys would either push me, say something mean, or, at that age. It wasn't anything evil, I'll be honest, but it was really upsetting to me. So I would tell my dad, this is, Muhammad Hussein did this, so he did that. Now, the principal was our neighbor, of all things, right? And she would come over sometimes too at that age, I remember. And like my mom knew her. She was a nice lady, I guess. Very strict looking, but whenever she was home, like it was just another auntie or something, who came over for tea and biscuits or whatever. But I remember this one time, and this was like maybe a year in, where I actually kicked this guy's butt. I pushed him, shoved him really hard. He fell down. He got scared, the other kid as well, even the big kid, and lo and behold, the principal calls me into the office, and she's like, well, why'd you do this? I know your parents, like, well, you're not this type of kid, what's going on? I'm like, man, this boy has been doing this and that to me for such a long time, like, and nobody's done anything about it. Like, oh, you should go home, and she calls my parents, and I go home. I tell my dad about this, and he's like, oh, I'm proud of you. That's very, very good. I remember up till the days he passed away, even then he would remember, oh, you remember Muhammad Hussain? I'm like, yeah, I remember that. The point I'm trying to make is, I'm very close with my father, right? And he was into this kind of stuff. And at that age, that's the most I could understand. Now, he got posted to several places around the world. The first posting was in Nigeria and Lagos, right? And he worked for the embassy of Pakistan over there. And so I was apparently just a year old. I don't remember this. I've seen photos of it. I have heard tons of stories about the stuff that had happened to us. And that's where all of this started for me as well. Not that I remember being there, but when those stories were carried forward, it's something that definitely, there's some details about that I probably shouldn't get into right now. But anyway, this is where my father, and this was, I don't even know if there was any lodge that met there, but it wasn't Freemasonry. He joined the Rosicrucian order, right? And I'm not talking about the SRIA. I'm talking about the California San Jose independent body. And he would get delivered to his house over there, and he collected them. I still have those pamphlets. Very cool looking archaic prints, look a bit typewritten even. The staples now are kind of rusty, but they're like, about this size, like fold a letter size page in half, and they were a little bit thick, I think about 30 pages each. Amazing little exercises for you to do. And then they were like, but one of the things I remember was, which I believe even psychologists use, is how at the end of the day, you're supposed to reverse your memory from the end till the very beginning and recount everything you did in reverse order. And then write down your observations of that day, right? And then the next day and the next day. And what that does is build a compendium of things for you to overall, in your lifetime, kind of assess and value it. That, oh, I reached from here to here. And you can even assess a cause and effect relationship between these things. So that was that, right? We go back to Pakistan, and now I'm going to preschool, right? And that's when he gets posted to Spain, which was, the best time of our lives, right? So it was me, my father, mother, and sister, right? All of us, we moved to Madrid, beautiful city in the 90s, right? We moved there in 1992. And it was just, maybe I was just too naive to maybe see the negatives of people, but I think in general, I think that helps you anyway, to play the card of the fool, essentially, and walk into something with huge ambitions and pure hearts, and somehow everything works in your favor, right? But it was an amazing thing. He deliberately didn't choose the poshest school, which was King's College, and he put us in what he said was second best on paper, but definitely not second best in terms of, of what it actually was, which is the Hastings School, which was also, so essentially it was very important because him being a diplomat, us being diplomats, that we should be around people of that same type. It wasn't a class or elitist thing. It was more about, we would be more comfortable around others as well who had come from abroad and are now adjusting, with some mixture of locals too. Somehow he managed to pull that off. He used to remind us even later in later years that was one of the best decisions I did. Look at you guys now. You can compete internationally because your primary school education was so good. And I believe that. I think that is extremely important. The formative years of your life are definitely the earliest ones. After that, you become a bit more rigid. Like life, when I look back on it, has always been this extremely interesting type of sequence of events that may seem random at the time, but they never really are, It just becomes one of these things where when you look back, it's like, oh, if that hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened. And if this hadn't happened, then that wouldn't have happened. So it's like a chain of things that are connected with such solid links that I just don't understand sometimes how we can just ignore this. I just look around. I mean, no slight on my friends and people that I meet in general. I don't think I'm superior to anyone because of this. It's just literally a change in perspective, right? So what have I earned, right? But it just changes everything for you. When you start believing in your intuition, people like to call it a gut feeling. I think that's too brute, it's too simplistic to say, oh, trust your gut. Sure, trust your gut, but that's just like for yeses and nos, right? I'm not talking about something so simple. We're talking about subtleties. We're talking about feelings and somehow listening to that inner voice. And I'm not talking about this inner voice, I'm talking about this inner voice, more towards your heart. And how that affects your life on a day-to-day basis. How much confidence that gives you, even in situations where everything seems to be going wrong. In situations where you get utterly destroyed. My wife and I, we talk sometimes. She's a bit of the worrying type. As I've noticed, many women are. And God bless them, because if they didn't, we would screw everything up anyway, right? But one of the things that I keep telling her is, look, you need to have faith. And she's Christian, okay? She's Christian, I'm Muslim. She's an actual practicing Christian, right? I wouldn't call her a religious fundamentalist, but she cares. I'm not really a practicing Muslim. I definitely look at these books from a different perspective. I try to find the similarities, this more spiritual perspective within them. I feel like their codex is for a higher message. But I have no problem letting anybody be who they are. So I tell her, look, you keep saying you've got faith, you're this, you're that, but at the end of the day, I've been called an atheist all of my life for whatever purpose, for whatever reason. And I feel like I have the most blind faith ever, because when it's the worst possible situation, yes, I'll go through the emotion, I'll come out of it really fast because of that faith, which is that, it's happening for a reason. I can't see it right now, but I've lived enough to know that anything good or bad that has happened has been a catalyst for something newer that was meant for me, right? And that is basically, I would say, the fundamental principle of my relationship with the cosmos, or with the universe, or with spirit, or with God, or whatever you want to call it, right? You could say, you could be religious about it, you could be spiritual about it, you could be completely scientific about it if you like. One thing you cannot be, though, is definitely you cannot be dogmatic about it, because it just doesn't go with it, right? Now, when I came back from Spain, we went to Pakistan, right? You get posted to a country for a certain amount of time. Now, at that time, my dad was close with the main political party that was ruling at the time. He was kind of in tune with the prime minister. They were actually a little close in terms of friendship. I'm not going to get into who, when, and what, but it was a good time for us to, because of that, it was said that, you know what, you should be here for an extra posting because everything is going so well under you. My dad was the most trustworthy, the most ethical, go by the rule person you can imagine. Right? And such a great mind. He would develop systems out of nothing and put them into place and adhere and make everybody adhere to the rules, and then it was a process now. So what that led to was overall a very good reputation, and because of that he got a double posting there, which means instead of 5 years we stayed there for about 10. So essentially I grew up there. Class 1 till high school I was there. My first language was Spanish. I still speak it fluently, which is so counterintuitive, and I have no issue with that whatsoever. We went back, and at that point I was essentially reintroduced, kind of, to my grandparents, although they had come visit us in Spain once. And it was very nice, and I really liked that. But I was never really connected to them per se, right? In those times you didn't have emails as such. You didn't have much of any communication with the outside world apart from your own country at that time. And I just used to love hanging out with my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, my father's side, right? And I didn't understand what it was. Just out of nowhere one day he started explaining, you're born February 21st, so, you're a Pisces, and these are certain traits that it just seems so cliche, right? Oh my God, horoscopes, really? But that's not what it was exactly. He literally sat me down. He said, just wait here, son. I'm like, okay. And he used to have these Mitchell milk candies on him. He would always give me one, and I would love those. And sometimes I feel like I only went there for those candies, but that's not true. So anyway, he sat me down, like, just sit down for a sec. I'm like, okay. And he opened his briefcase, the old black leather briefcase, Samsonite, click, click, opened it up, took out a blank sheet of paper, took out a pencil, okay, and he just started writing something, and I see him jotting down some numbers, and I see him just pausing to think and writing some more things down. And, pretty soon he had almost a full page of writing. And then he turned to me and he started talking about, this is the kind of stuff you were into when you were in Spain, right? He's talking about, I was into like history and stuff, right? So it's like, you like mythologies, you like history. I'm like, yeah, I love talking about ancient Greece, Egypt. I used to love the dinosaurs as well. That was very interesting to me. It's like, yeah. Like, you're very good, you make friends very easily. I did. I had tons of friends. I still have quite a few friends. Of course, now we're adulting, right? So nobody has time for anybody else, but we do get around. so many things. This is the kind of food that you should be eating, but you have a tendency to do this, to do that, and it was right. I still kind of do. I go into junk sometimes. So many different profound things. I don't remember that conversation entirely. I remember the feeling that I got from it, and it was just, anyway. Then I would see him quoting entire speeches, Churchill, Zoroaster, some Greek philosopher. So he would do them in English, Farsi, from Iran, and he would do them in Urdu, Farsi, Arabic, English, of course. I believe I've heard him speak in Latin as well a couple of times, albeit not such long phrases, Punjabi. So he would tell me philosophical poems, quotes, and speeches in all these different languages by heart. And I was like, how do you even do this? Well, he said, Salman, when you commit something to memory, you commit something to memory. That's how you do it. I'm like, but I can't even remember phone numbers nowadays. Like, yeah, that's because you have a phone on you and you don't need to. But this is how we used to do things. I'm like, wow, that is very impressive. And then he would not only just, like, he knew these languages, right? If he missed a word while orating something, he would know he missed that word. He would get up, go pick out that book, just for the sake of accuracy, check the word, and he confirmed the word to me, and put the book back, and then continue from there. So it was just very impressive. I was shocked most of the time by the amount of intelligence and effort that had been put into it. He was a civil engineer for Pakistan Railways, and this was from before the time, I would say, that Pakistan even existed, right? So this was from the time when the British were there. So he was part of the British Railways first, and then. And being a civil engineer in those days, his past is still a bit of a mystery to me. Eventually, what I figured out was, I saw a briefcase. Not that briefcase, another briefcase. And it had a symbol on it. And I was like, Dada. Dada is how you say grandfather in Urdu. Like, Dada, what is that? Like, oh, that's my lodge briefcase. Like, what does that mean? It's like, well, it doesn't exist anymore here, son, but we used to have a Masonic lodge in this city, and I was a part of that. I'm like, what is that? Like, well, it was a brotherhood. We used to meet, and it was very interesting. We had certain codes of conduct, and we would follow those. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, son, but I can't really tell you too much about it. This is the most I can let you know. At this point, Google was a thing now, right? You could look things up. You could search for passages and stuff. And I'm good with researching stuff and actually going through all the BS and going through to actual source material. And somehow I found out the actual initiation ritual for the first degree in Freemasonry, right? And I found, like, the Book of Constitutions for the Scottish Rite. And then I found a book by Albert Pike called Morals and Dogma at that age, right? I had no idea what I was looking into. And I started telling him things, and he got shocked because he was not from the internet era, right? He's like, how do you know these things? I'm like, well, these things are on the internet now. He thought about it for a second. He seemed a little bit disappointed, of course. But then, in the matter of a minute or two, he was like, well, that's very interesting, Salman, but it's stuff I just cannot talk to you about myself, right? And I would recommend that you don't read these things yourself without any context, but even if you do, it doesn't really make a difference. I'm like, okay. Anyway, that was where it started for me in terms of, I had no idea what Freemasonry was. It was like what most people think, right? I guess that on some level, it's not they that do it or we that do. It's more about the secrets are within you, and you just kind of figure them out along the way. Anyway, so for me, this is essentially the path in a very small nutshell, and already what seems to be about 40 minutes of the reasons why I kind of went into Freemasonry myself, hence the name of the channel, Ashlar Initiates, which of course we'll get into that a little bit later as well. I just feel like it's been the most significant part of my life so far. It's been an amazing journey so far, and I'm still so early into it as well, right? So if you were to ask me, has it changed me? I'll be like, definitely it has. Not in the way that you would think, right? If you were to ask me, oh, did you learn some secrets? I'm like, I would definitely be like, yes, I did. But not in the sense that you think secrets to be, right? And these are things that I hope some of the friends and some of my brothers will join in with me to discuss, so that all of us can kind of share our thoughts and allow you all to formulate your own opinions on them. Maybe even create some interest, right? And so that you can ask questions. And it's not a secret society, it's a society with secrets, sure. Although I must say that the purpose of this channel is not to discuss Freemasonry per se. It's to discuss some of the teachings that one eventually gets to understand through the initiatory process, through the Western esoteric schools, etc., etc. It's an introduction to this channel. It's a first for me. I hope I'm not making this too weird or awkward for anybody, apart from myself. And hopefully, I hope you guys will keep watching, keep commenting on whatever you feel you want to say, and we can continue the conversation going. All right. All of you guys, have a great one.